Hello, we're Deep Analytics LLC, and today we will be going over the key factors to make the boom camera gimbal assembly work correctly. We'll be going over how to install the gimbal, attach the camera in the correct orientation to the gimbal, install the system cables. For each of the gimbal modes, we'll go over what they do, what they're useful for, and how to switch in between them. To finish up, we will also go through some of the best practices in order to use the boom cam correctly, whether you're sweeping around cars or tables or going up into ceilings. Assembling the boom camera requires these items: the gimbal remote, the bipod, the crane gimbal, the camera and the cotter pin, as well as the system cables, and a boom camera pull system. First, we'll start with attaching the bipod. Attaching the bipod allows the gimbal to be held off the ground so you can do all of this on a flat surface. The bipod has slightly angled legs. Make sure the angles are pointing towards the back of the boom cam. Slide the boom camera into the bipod and align the flat surfaces on the pole end with the flat surfaces on the bipod. Next, we'll be installing the gimbal. We use the gimbal to stabilize the camera system. Slide the gimbal with the joystick facing up into the pole end. Press firmly and tighten the thumb screw. Next, we'll be installing the camera to the gimbal. When installing the camera, you want to make sure the back flat side of the camera, where the stickers are located, match up to the flat side on the gimbal, and there's also a micro USB port. All of this needs to be aligned. Once you have slid the camera in, use this applied cotter pin and put it through the hole. Now we will be attaching the system cables. Start with the pole end side and then move to the camera. The right angle cable goes on the pole end side. The straight side goes to the camera side. The system cables are comprised of two cables: a USB cable that has a coil in it, and an 8-conductor cable that has two circular connectors on each side. The USB cable is responsible for tethering back to the phone. This tethers 4K video. Inside of the coil, we run the 8-conductor cable. This is for power as well as our button presses for LED and capture. Once you have installed both of the cables, the pole end and the camera, you want to ensure that it is in this orientation and that the 8-conductor cable runs through the coiled USB cable. Having them in this orientation will allow the gimbal to move freely. To power up the system, first make sure you've installed batteries and then turn on the power rocker switch, which is located on the left side of the grip. Once you have done that, you should see 3 green LEDs illuminate on the back of the camera head. Once you have ensured that there is power, press and hold the power button on the gimbal for 2 to 3 seconds. It'll flash orange and then go steady orange and then blink blue. To pair the remote, turn on the power button on the remote. When the remote has a solid blue light, it has completely connected to the gimbal. The gimbal starts in tilt control mode as default. This means the gimbal can turn up and down, however cannot go left or right. From tilt control mode, if you press the mode button once, you enter tilt and roll. This means you can still tilt up and down, but now you can move left and right. You have limited movements due to cable strain. If you double press from the tilt and roll control, you enter the pan roll. This means you have no up and down movement on the joystick, but when you turn left and right, you turn on the pan axis, which again is the axis closest to the base of the gimbal. From here, if you double press again, you enter lock mode. This means you have no controls of the gimbal. To leave lock mode, double press the mode button again, and you are back in pan control mode. And from here, you do a single press to get back to tilt control. I now have tilt control, up and down, however I cannot go left and right. To ensure you get the best performance out of your boom camera, you want to use slow, deliberate movements and lead with the gimbal remote when scanning on objects on the ground, in a ceiling, or even under a vehicle. When scanning an object, use the gimbal remote to keep the gimbal fixed towards and centered on an object while moving back and forth. Now we will be demonstrating using the boom camera to search under a vehicle. For this, we are still in the tilt roll mode. So I go ahead and put it under the vehicle. I can turn the camera slightly left, slightly right to look under, to scan under, as well as move the camera up and down. For this demonstration, we're going to be looking up into the ceiling. I have the gimbal in the tilt roll mode, which means I have tilt control as well as roll control. I've also extended the pole slightly. I'll brace it and stick it into the ceiling. While it is in the ceiling, I can tilt left and right a little bit and see the surrounds in the roof. Now that you're familiar with the gimbal modes, and some best practices for the gimbal, we suggest that you go out and test it in real-world applications so that you are ready to use it in the field.